At my son's graduation, Dad laughed. 30 and still renting an apartment. Until my billionaire husband arrived in a Rolls-Royce with the deed to Dad's mortgage. Hello my people. Don't forget to hit subscribe, say hi below and share your location. We love seeing our family from all over the world. Let's get into the story. My name is Kesha Marshall and I'm 37 years old. The day my son Marcus graduated from high school should have been the proudest moment of my life. Instead, it became the day I finally understood what my father really thought of me. I was standing in the auditorium, clutching my phone, watching Marcus cross that stage in his royal blue cap and gown. Tears blurred my vision as they called his name. Marcus Antonio Marshall, graduating with honors. My baby. My everything. I'd worked double shifts at the hospital for 4 years to make sure he never felt the sting of poverty I'd known. Behind me, I heard my father's voice cutting through the applause like a rusty knife. Linda, look at her crying like she won the lottery. Girl still rents a 1-bedroom in the West Side. My stepmother Linda's uncomfortable laugh made my stomach twist. I turned slowly, meeting my father Raymond's eyes. He wore that same smirk he'd perfected over 30 years, the one that said I'd never be enough. What was that, Dad? He didn't even have the decency to lower his voice. I said you're 37 and still renting an apartment. No house, no husband worth mentioning, nothing to show for yourself except a kid you can barely afford. The families around us pretended not to hear, but I saw their eyes flickering our way. My chest tightened, that familiar burn of humiliation crawling up my throat. The memories crashed over me like a wave I couldn't stop. I was 7 again, standing in our old kitchen watching Daddy count money at the table. Why can't I go to dance camp like Shanice? I'd asked, my voice small. He'd looked up, eyes cold. Because Shanice's daddy makes smart choices. I made you. Those words tattooed themselves on my heart. At 12, when I brought home straight A's, he'd grunted. Grades don't pay bills, Kesha. Your brother Terrence, now he's got sense. Trade school, that's real education. Terrence dropped out 6 months later. I'd graduated high school pregnant and alone. Marcus's father, Devin, had been my first love, my only love at 17. When I told him about the baby, he'd looked at me like I'd ruined his life. I'm going to college, Kesha. I can't do this. He'd left town within a week. Daddy's response? See what happens when you spread your legs. You're damaged goods now. No decent man will want you. I'd proven him wrong by raising Marcus alone, by getting my nursing degree through night school while working full-time. Every accomplishment felt like climbing a mountain made of glass, beautiful but cutting me with every step. Now, standing in this auditorium watching my son succeed against every odd, Daddy still found a way to make me feel worthless. Actually, Raymond, I own 3 properties, I said quietly, my voice shaking. It was a lie, but I was desperate for him to stop. He laughed, loud and cruel. 3 properties? Girl, you can't even afford a decent car. You drove here in that beat-up Honda with the dented bumper. Linda touched his arm. Ray, maybe not here. Not here? Why not? He stood up and several people were definitely staring now. My daughter's been lying to herself for years. Might as well face reality at her son's graduation. Marcus is gonna end up just like her, struggling, barely making it, probably knock up some girl and repeat the whole cycle. Something in me snapped. Not the words about me, I'd heard worse from him. But talking about Marcus that way? My son who'd earned a full scholarship to engineering school? My brilliant, kind, hardworking boy who'd never once complained about our small apartment or second-hand clothes. You need to stop talking. Right now. My voice came out steel hard. He blinked, surprised. I'd never challenged him before, never raised my voice, never drew a line in the sand. Or what? You'll cry about it? That's all you've ever been good at, Kesha. Crying and making excuses. The auditorium had gone quiet around us. Even the principal on stage had paused, sensing the tension. That's when I saw Marcus. He was walking toward us, his face a storm of emotions. Mama. Marcus's voice cracked slightly. At 18, he towered over me at 6'2", but in that moment he looked like the little boy who used to crawl into my bed during thunderstorms. Is everything okay? Raymond turned to him with that same dismissive wave. We're just talking, boy. Explaining some facts of life to your mama. Facts. Marcus's jaw clenched, a muscle jumping the way it did when he was trying to control his anger. What facts are those, sir? The sir dripped with sarcasm I'd never heard from my gentle son. I grabbed Marcus's arm. Baby, don't. Let's just go celebrate your day. But Raymond couldn't leave it alone. He never could. The fact that your mama's wasted her life. The fact that she's got nothing to show for 37 years except you and a rented apartment. The fact that she's probably filling your head with dreams she can't afford to support. Marcus's hands balled into fists. The fact that my mama worked 2 jobs to raise me alone? The fact that she went to nursing school while working full-time? The fact that she never once made me feel poor even though we were. His voice was rising, tears streaming down his face. The fact that she's the strongest person I know and you've spent my whole life trying to break her? I'd never heard Marcus speak about our struggles before. He'd always been so careful not to make me feel guilty. That's enough. The voice came from behind us, deep and commanding. I didn't need to turn around. I knew that voice like I knew my own heartbeat. Julian. My stomach flipped as I felt his hand settle on my shoulder, warm and reassuring. I'd asked him not to come, to stay away from my family, to let me handle this day alone. But Julian Baptiste had never been good at following rules, especially when it came to me. Raymond's eyes widened as Julian stepped beside me. Even in a simple black suit, Julian commanded attention. 6'4", broad-shouldered, with silver threading through his dark hair and eyes that could freeze you or melt you depending on his mood. And who the hell are you? Raymond demanded. Julian Baptiste. He extended his hand, which Raymond ignored. Kesha's husband. The auditorium went completely silent. I heard Linda gasp. Marcus's eyes snapped to me, confusion written all over his face. We'd been married for 3 years, but I'd kept it secret from everyone except Marcus. Not because I was ashamed, but because I'd wanted something pure, something my father couldn't touch with his judgment and poison. Julian had understood, patient as always. But clearly his patience had limits. Husband. Raymond sputtered. Kesha's not married. I would have been invited to a wedding. You weren't invited because you weren't wanted, Julian said simply, his tone conversational but his eyes ice cold. Raymond's face turned purple. Now you listen here. No, you listen. Julian's voice didn't rise, but everyone in a 10-row radius was listening. For 3 years I've watched Kesha hide our marriage because she was terrified of your judgment. She's hidden our home, our life, everything good that's happened to her because you spent her entire life convincing her she wasn't worthy of good things. He pulled out his phone, scrolling quickly. You want to talk about property? Here's the deed to the house Kesha owns in Riverside. 5 bedrooms, bought 2 years ago, paid in full. He swiped again. Here's the investment property in the historic district. Generates $4,000 monthly in rental income. Another swipe. And here's the vacation condo in Hilton Head. I stared at the screen, my own properties I'd been too afraid to celebrate. Julian had encouraged every purchase, celebrated every success, but I'd kept it all hidden, afraid Daddy would find a way to diminish it. Raymond grabbed the phone, staring at the screen. His hands shook. Linda peered over his shoulder, her mouth falling open. That can't be real, Raymond whispered. Oh, it's very real, Julian said, taking his phone back. Want to talk about her beat-up Honda? It's a 2019, bought used because Kesha's practical. But there's a new Mercedes in our garage she refuses to drive because she didn't want you asking questions. This doesn't make sense. Raymond looked between Julian and me, his whole worldview crumbling. Kesha doesn't have money for this. She's a nurse practitioner, Julian corrected. She finished her master's degree 2 years ago. Makes 6 figures at the hospital, plus her clinic work on weekends. Marcus was crying openly now, and I realized these were tears of joy. He'd known about the marriage but not the full extent of everything else. I'd kept him humble, kept us both humble because I was so afraid of becoming the kind of person my father might finally approve of. Someone who measured worth in dollar signs. But she still lives in that apartment, Linda said weakly, like she was grasping at straws. No, Linda, I said quietly, finding my voice. Marcus lives in that apartment near his school so he could walk to class safely. I've lived with Julian for 3 years in our home on Maple Heights Drive. The one with the pool and the library you've probably driven past 100 times, wondering who could afford something so beautiful. Raymond's face had gone from purple to gray. Why would you hide this? Why would you let me think? Let you think what? My voice was getting stronger now, years of silence breaking apart. Let you think I was the failure you always told me I was? You want to know why I hid my success from you, Daddy? I stepped closer, and for the first time in my life I saw him step back. Because nothing I ever did was good enough. When I got straight A's, you said grades didn't matter. When I got into college, you said I'd just drop out. When I got pregnant, you said my life was over. When I kept the baby, you said no man would ever want me. My voice was shaking, but I couldn't stop. When I graduated nursing school, you said it was a waste of time. When I bought my first car, you said it was a piece of junk. When Marcus won his first academic award, you said sports would have been more impressive. Julian's hand found mine, squeezing. I spent 37 years trying to earn your approval, your love, your respect. And you know what I finally realized? You were never going to give it because you needed me to be a failure. My failure made your mediocrity look like success. Raymond's mouth opened and closed like a fish. That's not, you never what? Loved me? Believed in me? Saw me as anything more than your biggest disappointment. Tears were streaming down my face now. I know, Daddy. I've always known. The principal was approaching us nervously, probably worried about the scene, but I was past caring. This had been building for 37 years. You want to know what really happened? Julian's voice cut through the tension. When I met Kesha at the hospital 3 years ago, she was treating my mother after her stroke. She was brilliant, compassionate, and absolutely convinced she wasn't worth anything. He looked at Raymond with pure contempt. It took me 6 months to get her to agree to a coffee date because she genuinely believed no successful man would want a single mother. Can you imagine? This incredible woman, this amazing mother, this skilled professional, convinced she wasn't worthy of love because you'd spent her whole life telling her she wasn't. Raymond tried to speak, but Julian held up his hand. I'm not finished. When I proposed, she cried for an hour because she thought I was joking. When we got married at the courthouse, she made Marcus promise not to tell you because she was terrified you'd find a way to ruin it. And you know what the saddest part is? He pulled out his wallet, extracting a business card. You have no idea who your daughter married. No idea who I am or what I do. Because you never once asked about her life. Never showed genuine interest. Never cared unless it gave you ammunition to make her feel small. Raymond took the business card with shaking hands. I watched his eyes scan it, then widen. Baptiste Holdings, he read aloud. CEO and founder. You've heard of us, Julian said. It wasn't a question. Raymond's face had gone chalk white. Even I knew Baptiste Holdings was one of the largest commercial real estate development companies in the region. They'd built half the downtown skyline. You're that Baptiste? Linda grabbed Raymond's arm, whether to steady him or herself I couldn't tell. The billionaire? Marcus was looking at Julian with new understanding, pieces clicking into place. The expensive gifts Julian had given him that he'd said were from work. The casual mentions of business trips to New York and London. The way Julian had paid Marcus's entire college tuition up front, calling it an investment in family. I don't advertise my net worth, Julian said calmly. But yes, I've been blessed financially. And I've tried to bless your daughter, your grandson in every way they'd let me. Which hasn't been easy because Kesha spent so many years convinced she doesn't deserve good things. He turned to me, his eyes soft. Baby, I know you wanted to keep this private, but I can't watch him tear you down anymore. I won't. I was sobbing now, years of pain and shame and hidden joy all pouring out at once. Marcus wrapped his arms around me and Julian's arms came around both of us. We stood there, our little family, while my father's world crumbled around him. I didn't know, Raymond whispered, staring at the business card like it might bite him. You didn't want to know, I said, pulling away from Julian and Marcus. I wiped my eyes, standing up straighter. And you know what? It doesn't matter. The money, the houses, the successful husband, none of that should have mattered. I was worthy of your love when I was a broke single mother. I was worthy when I was struggling and scared and working myself to death. I was always worthy. My voice echoed in the now silent auditorium. But you couldn't see it because you were too busy using my pain to feel better about your own choices. Raymond's eyes flashed with something, shame maybe, or anger at being called out. I was hard on you because the world is hard. I was preparing you. You were destroying me, I interrupted. There's a difference between preparing someone for the world and convincing them they'll never be enough to survive it. You didn't make me strong, Daddy. You made me afraid. Julian, Marcus, my patients, my friends, they made me strong by believing in me. Linda was crying now, soft silent tears. I'd always wondered if she knew how cruel he could be, or if she just chose not to see. I have something else, Julian said quietly. He pulled an envelope from his jacket pocket. Raymond eyed it suspiciously. What's that? Julian opened the envelope, pulling out several documents. You know that house you're so proud of? The one you've been bragging about at every family gathering for 20 years. Raymond's face went rigid. What about it? You took out a second mortgage 3 years ago. Gambling debts, from what I understand. You're 6 months behind on payments. Julian's voice was matter-of-fact, but I could hear the steel underneath. The bank started foreclosure proceedings last month. Linda gasped. Ray, you said you handled that. I've been trying, Raymond started, but Julian cut him off. You've been trying to hide it. And you've been trying to borrow money from your other kids, from friends, from anyone who'd listen. Everyone except Kesha, because you were too proud to ask the daughter you'd spent 37 years calling a failure. My heart was pounding. I looked at Julian, seeing where this was going. You didn't, I whispered. He smiled, that devastating smile that still made my knees weak after 3 years. I bought the mortgage from the bank 2 weeks ago. The deed to your father's house is in my car. In a filing cabinet. In a Rolls-Royce Phantom, to be specific. The one I drove here in. The auditorium was so quiet you could hear people breathing. Raymond looked like he might have a heart attack. Here's what's going to happen, Julian said, his voice calm but absolute. You have 2 choices, Raymond. Choice 1. I forgive the debt entirely. You keep your house free and clear, no payments. But you apologize to your daughter and grandson right here, right now, and you mean it. And you never disrespect either of them again. He paused, letting that sink in. Choice 2. You keep being the bitter, small man you've always been. And I proceed with the foreclosure. You lose everything, and you do it knowing that the daughter you called a failure had the power to save you and chose not to. Raymond's hands were shaking so badly the business card fluttered to the floor. Linda was crying harder now, pulling at his sleeve. Ray, please. Just apologize. Please. I watched my father's face, saw the war happening behind his eyes. Pride versus survival. Ego versus reality. For a moment I thought he might choose pride. Might let his house go rather than admit he'd been wrong. But then he looked at me, really looked at me, and something cracked in his expression. Kesha, he said, his voice breaking. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. And for the first time in 37 years I saw my father cry. I felt Julian's hand on my back, felt Marcus's presence beside me, and I knew I had a choice too. I could hold on to the anger, let him lose everything, finally have my revenge. Or I could choose freedom. The debt is forgiven, Daddy, I said quietly. Not because you deserve it, but because I do. I deserve to be free of this. To stop carrying your disappointment like chains. I turned to Marcus, whose face was radiant with pride. Baby, let's go celebrate your graduation properly. At the restaurant. Our whole family. I looked at Julian, at the man who'd loved me when I couldn't love myself, who'd fought for me when I was too tired to fight. Our real family. As we walked out of that auditorium, past the whispers and stares, Marcus between us and the late afternoon sun streaming through the windows, I finally felt it. Not revenge. Not vindication. But something better. Peace. The kind that comes when you finally realize you were never the problem. I was 37 years old, and for the first time in my life I was enough. I'd always been enough. And I had the family, the love, and the life to prove it.